Hello, and welcome to episode 11 of Pinball in the Machine. This is where we talk about our blind stumblings through what might loosely be termed spiritual awakening. So if your life is seeming a bit odd, or you're hitting the wall, this might give you a different point of view. Each week, Tom and I meet to discuss our progress or otherwise, and this is from those conversations. So you might want to grab a coffee and sit in as we attempt to describe the indescribable. I'm Greg, and I'm here with my dear friend Tom. Hiya, Tom. How's it going?
Hi, Greg. Nice to see you again.
Yeah, you too.
It's been a little week and a half, really, hasn't it, since we last chatted? So a little bit more time than usual to report back on. First of all, I'm having a super good day today.
Hey.
But I don't think I had a particularly good last 5 days, really, if I think about where I was. Although I was definitely taking solace from the whole, can you open up your heart if your feet are in hell? That's still really front and center for me. But I mean, essentially, what I'm finding at the moment with the journeying is that it's giving me the language to describe certain feelings. And once I've got that language and I hear those words, it's quite a shock. It hits you hard.
Yeah.
And I've then got to process it. Maybe this is what happens if you have like a revelation in therapy or something. I don't know. But you have to sit into what you've just heard because it really feels right.
Yeah.
But then eventually you get over the shock of what you've heard and you come out the other side.
Yeah, you kind of assimilate it.
Yeah. And then sometimes if you go onto it again, you realize that it was there all along. The words were there, they just weren't in the right order. And maybe a part of anxiety is the sense that there's something there that you can't quite verbalize, and a worry that it's not going to be something very nice. But invariably, it ends up being okay.
Yep. Sometimes
and that's where I sit now. Sometimes you what? Sorry?
Sometimes I question it at the time. I think, this isn't right. This isn't what I ordered. And then, that's what I get. Lots of laughter. And then it kind of beds in. And it's like they never give you too much. It's just enough.
Yeah. And now I'm having one of those days today where it feels like, I've completed a level. I've got this now.
Yeah.
But I also know, and let's be honest, that this is just part of a process, and there will be another occasion soon and then another one, and we will keep on going through this.
Yeah, I hope so. I don't want it to end. It's such an adventure, and I really don't want anybody to miss it. It's so amazing.
So yeah, that's me.
You're looking good. Well, it's been a week. Like you, the upgrades, my goodness. And the subsequent downloads, it just keeps getting better. As you're saying, it just rolls out as we go, and it's blowing my brain. And I'm reminded, of my impression of those people who've been struck by lightning. They get that lightning moment, and they wake up and they can read minds and foretell the future. And I get it in little dribs and drabs. There's a little crumb here and another crumb over there, and then somehow I need to piece it together. And that's kind of what I've been doing this week. But now they're making it easier because they're showing me very succinctly as to how it all connects up and how we create our reality and all this other stuff. So we've got tons of stuff to talk about down the line. But last week, you were talking about your trip to Scotland, and I kept thinking I wanted to hear the rest of the story, So can you tell me a bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. Well, it was more kind of it was interactions with somebody who was part of this sort of fairly ancient Scottish family, and I was sort of this was between the ages of sort of 13 and 17, and just for context, I was sort of schooled in this quite high Anglican church style, cathedral style, right. Eucharist, all this kind of stuff. And I got talking to them about history. I was interested in the Crusades. And it was just one of those moments where you just meet a soul at the right time and you have a revelatory conversation, and put me on to all sorts of sort of esoteric and gnostic rabbit warrens to go down, Dead Sea Scrolls, Knights Templar, Old Man of the Mountain. It had all come about because I'd found this gap in the timeline from the classic historical textbooks about when the Templars actually landed in Jerusalem.
Oh, right.
And I said, where we've lost 8 years here. Where is it? And then he told me, he said, they rocked up 8 years before all the mainstream historians say they did. They started digging under the Temple of Solomon and they found some stuff. And then they went with it. But for me, it was fantastic. I look back on it and cherish it, because if I hadn't been put in that direction, I would have had to be undoing so much kind of high Anglican propaganda, conditioning. So
it's a weird juxtaposition, isn't it, between your experience and the teaching?
Massively so. It was a massive juxtaposition. But my gut told me that this was right. And, sitting there in that cathedral, kind of doing those prayers and those hymns, I was very happy that it was all bollocks. But I was comfortable with it because I had a place. The Gnosticism, the idea that it's all within you. You have your own power. And I'm fortunate that happened at quite a young age, right? Because it meant you didn't have to spend so many years unpicking stuff to start to build the foundations of what we're both absolutely convinced is the right way to is a good way to go about things.
Yep.
And here we are today, right? Trying to piece back together stuff that has been going on for tens of thousands of years.
Yep.
That Western society has just parked.
I'm listening to a book at the moment that unravels lots of this stuff, and it's a relatively new book called The Immortality Key by Brian Marescu. Blowing me away, man. The audio version is fantastic.
Marescu, did he do the stuff on the mushrooms?
Yeah, that's the one. He's the one. He's got all his research together, and it's out. So,
maybe we'll have to touch on that one day on a separate pod.
Well,
because I like that stuff.
Rock and roll.
So look, I spent my teens kind of, going around these sort of Templar churches, looking at all the symbols on there. There's a lot of interesting stuff on those, like the Green Man, ancient symbols, a lot of duality. And I still refer back to that stuff today.
It's funny how the lessons are there all along, huh? Like you said.
Sure is.
That experience shifted your timelines.
Well, yeah, I guess so.
Or it made it easier to shift timelines. You shifted them sooner and easier, perhaps.
It did, but it was a real world timeline shift, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was whereas what we're also saying last week is that you can also shift your timelines from within as well, through sort of journeying and meditation. So can I give you another example?
Oh, do, because we were going to move on from the timeline bit last week, and we're right on point, I guess. Go for it.
So Do you remember I once told you about a journey where I had a really vivid image of this like warrior-like female figure with her army behind her?
Oh, yes.
And then this really strange building. It doesn't, this building doesn't have any kind of real world context. It almost looked like a bunch of caves that had been pieced together with windows and doors. And, it was,
Right.
and it was a very, quite a powerful experience. I came out of it. And do you remember I came out of it and told you about, and then I showed you a drawing of it.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And I'm not an artist. So I came out and immediately had to draw it. And then I remember I went to, I think I went to go to one of these posh wine shops to buy a bottle of wine for my uncle. And I was like, oh, he really likes this special kind of grape, but you probably haven't got it. And they sort of went into the back. I think we might have something. And he dusted off this bottle. And if it wasn't the same building on this bottle, and I just was like, okay. And that for me was a moment in time, because I'm convinced that from that moment, I fundamentally changed in the real world. I was able to catch I started off suddenly realizing I wasn't getting angry. I wasn't having bursts of that feeling. I was leaning into everything, even when I was driving or playing football, and usually there's kind of conflict and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
There was none of it. And I wondered whether part of that entity that I met was almost kind of my feminine, that I'd never kind of seen or accessed before, because it fundamentally changed me.
Yep.
And I wonder whether that is an example of the timelines shifting.
It's an example of the setup that will enable the timeline to shift. It's the setup right there.
Yeah.
As you get it, you think, right, boom, there they are. I'm connected. Now the timeline shifts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because if I hadn't had that, I would have been on the old path.
Yes.
And you don't just wake up and start drawing something immediately when you've never drawn anything since you were at play school.
Or you've seen my work.
Yeah, unless something is driving it.
Yeah.
And I've had time to reflect, and also you have time to reflect on your change in behavior. Now what it has meant, obviously, is that because my behavior has fundamentally changed as a result, that means that in the real world, relationships have changed, both positively and sometimes negatively as well, as people maybe react to your new energy or your new vibration. And some people lean into it, some people lean away from it. But that then comes back to what we talked about in terms of your tribe, right? Your tribe gets naturally selected based on your vibration.
Yep.
And if you change that vibration, then that will edit the tribe as well.
Yep.
That, I don't.
You've nailed it right there.
I don't look. Yeah, that's it. I don't look back on it with anything apart from, joy, and I think that's also. We talk about this differential. People sort of searching for happiness. What makes me happy? But actually, the feeling is in the progress.
Yeah,
and that is a good feeling.
Yeah. It's like we've been taught to go for the outcome, forgetting that the process is where the magic happens. The outcome is just the result of the process, right?
That's right.
So we miss the magic.
And how we approach the process, how we conduct ourselves in the process is where all the meaning comes in.
Yeah. It's a great ride.
I hope that was you
nailed it,
example.
because you really showed that once the shift happened, everything else followed. It wasn't like you were forcing anything.
No.
You can't force it. You have to align. I've been really mulling over this during the week, because all of these things, how do you know your timeline is shifting? Well, I've just realized after something like 20 years where a big timeline shift happened for me, and I never really got it as a timeline shift at the time. And this was back in the day. I was invited to Israel by a coaching academy. They wanted me to train their coaches in NLP. And I went over there, and as a result of the work I did on that visit, I was asked to come back. But on the first visit, I'd never been to Israel before, or at least not as I'd remembered. And I was invited to visit Old Jerusalem. I thought, well, great, I'm here, let's do it. When I arrived in Jerusalem, I sort of felt something familiar, but that's as far as I'll go with that. I don't want to make that something it may not be. Anyway, a guide picked us up, and he said, do you want to do the Stations of the Cross? Well, I'm a lapsed Catholic, and I didn't particularly want to do the Stations of the Cross, but I felt it would be churlish not to, since my host was very willing to go along. So we did the Stations of the Cross, and we ended up at Golgotha, apparently where the crucifixion took place. And it's a stone that sticks out of a concrete floor. They've concreted around the stone, and a part of it sticks out from the floor about, 2 feet. And they put a perspex or a bulletproof glass cover over this stone, except for one side. So you have to crawl in if you want to touch the stone. And it's in a cafe that is military. It's like metal and glass. So there's no style here. And they said, well, do you want to touch the stone? And I didn't particularly, want to touch the stone, but I felt it would be, So I was polite and I crawled in. And as soon as I touched the stone, I was on my hands and knees and I reached in and I touched the stone. And this energy came up through my body. It felt like from my knees, but I don't know where. And it blasted out of my eyes. The tears, it felt like my eyes were fire hoses. I've never felt anything like it in my life. I didn't know what it was. It didn't last. It was like kaboom. And then I had to kind of recover myself and mop myself up really so I could go back out. And I kind of parked it, not thinking about it. So as a result of the work I did, another group, a completely different group, completely different subject, invited me to come back and talk to their group. And they had 2 groups, and I was going to do a day's talk twice to each half of the group, or to each group. So I kind of knew the subject, right? So I thought, right, and I had a few months to go till I came back. But it was all day, and that's a lot of material. It's a lot of timing, a lot of editing, and so on and so forth. And I thought, yeah, but I wasn't worried. I thought, I got plenty of time. And then I had 10 days, and I still wasn't worried. And I thought, and what I was really worried about was the fact that I wasn't worried because, my ancestors.
So used to it.
Yeah, no, and my ancestors are mostly Irish, and the Irish and the Israelis are the same. When they pay their money, you better deliver the goods, baby. So I am going, yeah, cool, I got 10 days. And then I had 2 days, and all I had was an opening sentence, and I'm going to be standing in front of these people all day long. So here I am. I'll say I'll do it on the way to the airport, or when I'm at the airport, and I don't. And then I say I'll do it on the plane, and I don't. And I get there on the Monday, and my talk is on the Tuesday. They take me out to a nightclub. They go out at 10:30 at night. This is, the night starts. I mean, I'm normally, sound asleep. Anyway. I show up on the Tuesday morning, I have my opening sentence, and I am not scared. And this is really concerning me now because I should be bricking it, and I'm not. Anyway, I winged it the whole day, completely winged it. I could not tell you a word of what I said.
No, you were channeling it.
And there were 2 partners who ran this coaching academy. So the woman was on the Tuesday, and her husband was coming on the Thursday. He shows up on Thursday. He said, Greg, what was going on Tuesday? I said, I don't know what happened. He said, I heard you've never been better. Now, I've trained him and his partner for 3 months in advanced hypnotherapy sometime previously. Anyway, so he's saying, today better be good. I'm thinking, oh, great, I got an opening sentence. And I just winged the whole day again. And he said, it was amazing. And I'm kind of reeling, thinking, okay, what I didn't realize was that event, and I only got this when I was thinking about it this week, that event changed how I did corporate training from then on. I have a very wide skeleton, and then I let the group direct the training because then it's right for the group. each group is different. Each group has different needs. So rather than me telling them what they need to know, they're telling me where we need to go, and I wing it.
Yeah.
And I love that.
I was
that was a huge timeline for me.
I don't know if you remember, but when we spoke about 2 years ago, this is a really nice moment of kind of synchronicity. I told you a little bit of the Scottish story,
yep.
and I showed you a card, like a calling card.
Oh yes,
which had like symbols, which had symbols on it. Okay,
yes.
But I didn't say any more than that. And then you told me a bit of the Golgotha piece,
right?
And that was a real revelation moment for me, because what I hadn't told you was that as part of the kind of the conversation of the questioning, this chap had asked me to have a guess at what I thought the symbols meant.
Right.
And there was a skull on there. And I said to him, "Oh, is that skull, is that a reference to Golgotha? Because that means place of the skull."
Right.
Okay. And then I told you that. And so that was a beautiful moment of synchronicity for me, and just grounded me in the fact that I better be speaking to Greg once a week here, because we are vibing like you wouldn't believe. So maybe that's another timeline jump as well.
Yes. And so the thing is, if we're aware, and I only got this week when I suddenly realized how that event in Golgotha, just changed everything.
Yeah.
And since then, the fear has been falling away, which has enabled me to journey. And I was thinking earlier when you were talking about down the rabbit holes, when you said, "Oh, here's a rabbit hole with the Templars and whatever," your ability or willingness to go down is because you don't fear it. You say, right, let's find out what's going on. It's always the same thing. It's always the fear that holds us back. Oh, I feel so much better having spoken to you, Tom. Thank you.
Amazing.
I don't know what we're going to talk about next week. We'll think of something.
Well, did we talk about, we were talking about maybe thinking about describing how it can get easier to kind of get into the place.
Okay.
It gets easier and easier. Or maybe the feelings that can help you to settle into it really
okay,
easily.
I'll think on that.
I'll have a little think on that.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant. Thank you. Well, that pretty much brings us to the end of another episode, and I don't know how we got here so quickly. Thank you for listening in. If you enjoyed our meanderings, please rate us and review us on whichever platform you're using. We'd really like to hear your thoughts, questions, experiences. You can reach out to us at pinballinthemachine.com or through our Facebook group, or hello@pinballinthemachine.com if you want to email. So from myself, Greg, good day. And from my dear friend, Tom.
See you later, guys.
We look forward to joining you next time. But for now, we're down.